You read it now.
We'll see.
Yeah.
Okay, question number 1 is when... Oh, you want us to write the answers down? Well, you have to, you write the answers down.
Yeah,
We'll
you
answer,
write
you
the
write
answer
it down.
down.
Okay, question number 1.
Go get where you came from and tell them to help you write the answer down. Because then you'll never forget if you write it.
Well, here's the first question. I'm not sure I understand it. It says, when did you make this movie? Which movie?
Which movie?
1966.
Well, that was the first one.
First one.
The last one that you were in was from probably about 94.
I was in the first one.
But you were in all the movies too.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. So the last movie you did would have been Star Trek VI, The Undiscovered Country, and I think that was 1990.
Don't ask me any questions.
We're not going there.
So
I will make it up.
she was playing that character for 25 years. Because the Star Trek VI came out on the 25th anniversary.
Wow.
That's right.
Great. Yo. Anybody else?
Well, we have another question on the card here first.
Okay.
How many
Another
people?
like that.
How many people were in the show? I believe about 7 regular cast members. Well, let's count it. Kirk, Spock, McCoy, Scott, Chekhov, Sulu, Uhura.
Yes.
There's 7. I wasn't there all the time. I think it's always a magical 7. How many castaways were on Gilligan's Island? 7.
Seven's a magic number.
It's an unwritten rule of TV.
Right.
It's always 7.
Right.
Okay, so there's a question out here. This lady in blue.
Lady in blue. Go ahead.
We can't hear you.
Jeff Marcy wants to know.
Jeff Marcy wants to know, what will you be doing to celebrate the 50th anniversary of Star Trek on September 8th, 2016?
What are you going to do to celebrate the 50th anniversary of Star Trek on September 8th, 2016? 2 years from now. You're coming over to my house for a party, remember?
Yeah.
Having a large bottle of champagne, leaving one at my house and taking the other to his house, getting him to drive me there.
By the way, we're all neighbors. We really are. All 3 of us live in
We all live in the
Woodland.
same town. Woodland Hills.
About 5 minutes apart from each other.
Yes.
I don't know why
And
we
laugh our heads off.
Yeah, right.
my guess is I'm going to be there. You're going to be there. My guess is you'll be there too in Las Vegas for the Star Trek convention in August of 2016.
So don't
we'll
do
be
it.
there about 4 weeks early before the anniversary.
Yeah, exactly
But
right.
come out to Vegas in 2016.
Come out because it's going to be a big one.
It's going to be a big one.
50
The whole
years.
original cast will be there, and that's going to be the one to be at. I'm telling you.
And
Okay, so you have a question over here in blue.
young
The
lady.
little lady.
That's you. Yes,
Yeah.
you.
Are you going to be making more movies?
One only hopes.
We did make a movie together called, and I got to shameless plug it right here, it's called Unbelievable, and it's a whole spoof on Star Trek. And I got to say this, and I'm not trying to diss him, but William Shatner did not want to be in it. Nichelle and I were in it. There was other actors that were in it. And it was so clever because the gentleman that produced it said, I see, we can't get Shatner. Okay, what we'll
And then he
do...
wanted to be in it.
Yeah. No, but the guy was so clever. He made Captain Kirk into a marionette.
Oh, yes, that was brilliant. Absolutely
And he never uses
brilliant.
Captain, he just calls him Kirk.
Give us the name again, Sean, the movie.
Unbelievable.
And it's coming out soon, isn't it?
Coming out, I think it'll be maybe February, March, I think they said. They just got Pierce Brosnan to do a cameo. They've got like 37 of us in the show. A lot from
Yeah.
Star Trek.
Yes.
So you guys, it'll be in the theaters.
Unbelievable.
Unbelievable.
That is unbelievable.
Yeah.
There was a question over here somewhere. Yes.
I'm pretty sure you guys are aware of the new J.J. Abrams version.
The new J.J. Abrams version of the movies. We were talking about that just the other day.
I like them.
What about them?
I was just curious, like you said before, Star Trek is mostly about the message that it gives, and I was curious to know, do you guys think it's still sending that message, or if the message has to change?
She's curious if you think, because the original Star Trek was so message heavy, every episode had a message. Do you feel these new movies that J.J. Abrams is doing have messages and things to say, or are they just entertainment? What do you think?
Um, I know what I want to say. I'm correcting I'm editing myself. What was the
So
question?
you want to say what I was thinking?
She was saying that were the moral messages in the J.J. Abrams movies that was in Star Trek the series, the moral messages. Do you feel?
I refuse to answer that on the grounds that it may incriminate me.
Well, I like the way they took the Spock, and I think J.J. got a little stuck on with the first movie, the first one he did, which was, I'm going to have Leonard Nimoy in this, and then I'm creating Zach Quinto as the young Spock. What do I do? And he must have been in rewrite saying, I know, I'll create an alternative universe. Because they meet each other, right? Young Spock and the older Spock. And I thought, wow, that's a clever idea, that they were from a parallel universe.
Yeah.
So I think in those things, I saw Pike was in there as well, but I think in those things, he didn't hit you over the head with a message, but I think you read through it that goodness does prevail. And I think it wasn't just leaving evil out there, that it's always going to be around. I remember the first one with the guy with the face, with the scars on, tattoos on his face, and it was pretty heavy. But
Well, some of the things.
That was the,
Go ahead.
that was the creator's original must-have. That it had to be, have a reality
Yes.
to it, and then you can go and play with it. But in final analysis, the audience has to feel like you know that guy,
Yeah.
or feel like you're in that.
You're in that
scene,
situation.
In that
Yeah, and
situation.
what would you do?
Because you
Good
have
judgment.
been in
Yeah,
situations.
exactly, yeah, and use good judgment.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I've talked to a lot of the people who were on the show. I interviewed everybody for the books, and John D.F. Black, who was one of the first producers on the show, and wrote the words, Space, the Final Frontier. Gene didn't write those, John D.F. Black did. He did the foreword for book 1, Walter Koenig did the foreword for book 2, and David Jarrell for book 3. I asked them all the same question that you just asked. What do you think of the new movies? And everyone agrees that they're very entertaining, and that they do preserve certain important aspects of Star Trek. But I think we are all in agreement that the original was the best. You can't top the first, because
The original cast agrees with you.
you, as good as they are, you cannot top Leonard Nimoy as Mr. Spock. Nobody can. And the thing is, like, and my son, who's now 20, but he was about 16 when that first J.J. Abrams movie came out. And he started watching the original Star Trek because of it. He came home, and I'm working on these books, and he sticks his head in the office and says, Dad, I've been watching that show you're writing the books about. And every night on Channel 56 here in LA or whatever, and he says, it's pretty good. And he said it's way better than that sucky one you wrote for The Next Generation. Because he knew I did a script for Next Generation. Sorry, by the way, which was not a bad episode. But he didn't like that one because he said the first one would really make him think it was faster paced. He liked the characters. He liked the conflict between the characters. That they were friends and they did the self-sacrifice, as you said earlier, but that they didn't always agree.
That's right.
That's right.
And the tough thing for me when I went in and pitched to Gene for Next Generation is I went in and to pitch some stories for the show. I said, well, let's do a story about greed. And he said, well, we don't have greed anymore. Man's gone beyond that. I said, what about lust? We don't have lust anymore, and all that type of stuff. So I had this idea in my back pocket about what would happen to a Vulcan if he goes through senility. And if he goes through senility, a Vulcan. And the minute I said that, it was what you were talking about earlier about Gene, a connection. He was playing with some object that was on his desk, some strange little object, a Rubik's Cube.
He always was.
Yeah, and the minute I said that, he just stopped playing it and he turned and he looked at me, and I thought, okay, this one's going to go. Because it was just a concept that struck him.
Yeah.
But he believed in humankind. He felt that we would get away from our faults. And so Star Trek The Next Generation was more intellectual, where Star Trek, the first show, was more action-adventure. So it's a different taste, whether you like it or not. But the new movies get a little cartoonish. don't you think?
Yeah, a little
See
too
that guy
much
throw
special
Spock
effects.
all the way across the
Yeah.
room, he hits a
Yeah.
wall,
Yeah.
and he gets right back up, no broken bones, and he comes right back into the fight.
Well,
And that, to me, that's a problem for me, personally.
Oh, he was a rubber man.
I didn't know that.
came from the planet rubber. Anybody else out there?
Over here in the blinding light, I see a hand.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
How long did it take to create each episode, and did it stay on budget?
Never.
Never.
It always stayed on budget.
Don't believe her.
You're lying.
Whatever it finished with,
That
that was the budget.
Well, Mark has an interesting thing I did not know, but I remember not meeting her, but seeing her on the set one day with Lucille Ball, loved the show. Now, as I understand, she thought it was going to be a comedy at first when she heard about Star
Well,
Trek.
she knew it was an adventure show, but she thought Star Trek, it was going to be like Bob Hope going to entertain the troops. And she thought, how can that not be a hit?
But she liked the short miniskirts, because I was there when she was with Bill Dice, and I was in there just my uniform, and I saw her come in, and she talks like this, because she's moving a lot. And she said, "Oh my God, Billy, I love these outfits. How did you do this?" And oh, the hair, stay with the hair. The hair is really cool. I mean, she was like, she owned the studio. People don't know this. They keep seeing Paramount. No, that
Desi Lu.
series was owned by Desi Lu. But what Mark just informed me on, and I didn't know, was they went bankrupt because of Star Trek.
All the
Was what?
budgets, she
They
lost
went
her
bankrupt
studio.
because of Star Trek.
Because of you, in particular. The
They asked
hair,
for
the
too much
hair, it
money.
all costs too much money.
But they had this, as he's making me understand. Don't cry now.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. But they sold the studio to Paramount,
Because of Star Trek, Mission Impossible.
the next lot over.
All the budgets for every episode are in these books. I feel bad for you. You have to have all those books in your lap. Those are 3.5 pounds each. It was a hard labor for me. All the budgets are in there. The show almost always went over budget. And by halfway point of the second season, Desi Lu went broke and had to sell to Paramount because of Nichelle.
True story.
And when
I
Paramount
tried
came
to
in,
tell them I was the communications officer. I tried to tell everybody. They wouldn't listen to me.
you forgot to mention the Bluetooth.
Oh, yeah.
There's something else that came off of that show. Right out of her ear.
Hello.
As far as staying on schedule,
Sorry, I can't hear this.
Yeah,
Bluetooth
that's
isn't
right.
there.
She had it in there too long.
it was supposed to be shot in 6 days an episode, which was the average for a TV series back then. But imagine doing half a science fiction movie every 6 days. And most of the episodes took about 7 days to shoot, and most of them went about 20, 30, 40,000 over budget, which would be about like $300,000-400,000 over budget per episode. The average episode in today's money cost about $1.3 million. So doing 26 to 29 episodes a year, which they did back then, that took a lot of money out of a small studio like Desi Lu, and that's what happened there. But Lucy believed in the show, and she was the one, the board of directors said, don't do it, you'll lose your studio. And this is when, after she knew what it was about, and they explained the premise to her, and she said, no. Here's what she said: reruns from I Love Lucy is what built this studio. And I'm looking for another show that can rerun for at least 10 years. And this show can do it. 10 years.
That's right.
Try 50.
50 years.
48 and counting. Who else has a question? Yes, over here.
You've mentioned a lot of ways that.
Would you stand up so
Yeah,
we
stand
can
up.
see who?
And I'll repeat the question so everybody can know what she says. What is it, dear?
You've talked a lot of ways about how the show was prescient in terms of the technology and all the different things and also social issues.
Yep.
Are there any things that you would say were maybe dated or not in that category?
Dated?
Ahead of its time, yeah. Are there any things, are there any things that were in there that you would say, oh, I wish that wasn't in there now?
Any shows you did or messages you made that you feel maybe you shouldn't have?
More technology.
There's no such thing. Whatever you see it now and you think that's, nobody's ever done it. It's been done. Only weren't tuned into it. I mean, do you know what I'm saying? There is nothing new that hasn't been done in some way, in somewhere, in some millennium, and the writer has just tuned into that. That's what I believe.
And I was taking a director's course one time in LA, and this gentleman said to me, he says, you know, there's only 36 plot lines. And I said, what do you mean? He says, if I go along and I tell you which each plot line is in the world, in every movie, it'll be in the 36, there's no more. Somebody tried to get 37, they didn't do it. I said, really? This was a Hasidic Jewish man at Antioch University down in Santa Monica, and I said, wow. I said, well, what about my dinner with Andre? He said, we don't talk about that one. Because my dinner with Andre broke the paradigm on 37. It didn't help, right? And so, and I'm sure it was not his pet after that one. But anyway, no, true. And look at the TV series. They're in sets of 12 or 6. Well, what's 3 years or 12 each season? 36 plots. Then they take the 36th plot and they go back and do them over again, but they kind of shade them a little bit. Well, I never knew that was the way it is.
But one thing I'll say, to debate you, and I think she went, was there a theme or a statement that maybe they should have made? But you know what? You think of some of the Star Trek episodes from the first series. There was the episode The Enemy Within, which Richard Matheson wrote, and where Captain Kirk is split into two by the transporter. And one of his is his primal side, and one of his is his intellectual side. And the statement of this episode was that neither one could command the Enterprise. In order to be a leader, personality, you have to have good and bad.
Yes.
You have to have ambition
Yes.
and ruthlessness mixed with fairness. And nobody had ever really analyzed that or examined that in television or movie before. Not in that way. Star Trek did an episode called The Mark of Gideon in the third year, which examined overpopulation. You know, they did that half white, half black episode. Well, there had been shows on TV that had talked about racism, but never in that way. You know, so yes, you're absolutely right. There's only so many plots. Shakespeare said 12, but I've heard 36. And I've worked in TV. We finesse them. We'll make it into 36. But the thing is Star Trek presented them in a way that had never been seen before. And to my way of thinking, still hasn't. When I think back to the originality of that show, let me tell you one real quick as an example. To let you see, and you can read this in these books again, to let you see where these ideas came from. You all know the episode Balance of Terror, where the first episode with the Romulans. And they have to chase the Romulan ship because it came over the neutral zone, destroyed an Earth base, and is now retreating. And Kirk's orders are to engage it before it crosses the neutral zone or let it go, because we can't cross that line. Well, a week earlier, in the papers, the Vietnam War is raging. The Viet Cong had started doing strikes where they would come across the border. They would do a strike in South Vietnam and then go back to the north, and we could chase them up to that line, but we couldn't go across.
Wow.
So they said, let's do that next week on Star Trek. And they created the Romulans, and they did that story. Now, who would catch that? Maybe none of us. But you watch that, and the next time you're reading it back then about this, it kind of rings in your head that Kirk had to kind of fight a battle like this once. And what was he going to do? And that's how they would take the headlines out of the newspapers. Now, book 3 is just coming out, so I'm going to give you a little peek. Spock's Brain. Did you like that episode, Spock's Brain, where they took his brain out of his head in the 3rd season?
Oh, Spock's Brain.
Yeah.
Yes.
Did you know that won its time slot? It beat the 2-hour premiere of Hawaii Five-0. Killed it in the competition in the Nielsen's, Spock's Brain. But let me tell you where it came from. You probably don't even know this,
I don't.
because you were busy on stage acting.
Yeah.
Gene Roddenberry and Gene Kuhn came up with that idea in their office because 2 weeks earlier, before they wrote the script, the first heart transplant had taken place in South Africa.
I did know that.
And the people were protesting, weren't they?
Yeah.
People were upset. Man doesn't have the right to play God and all that.
Oh, yeah.
And they thought, well, this is heavy. What do we do with this? What's more controversial than a heart transplant? What about a brain transplant? So now maybe that episode didn't work as well as others, but you look at how they approached coming up with their ideas. That was the brilliance of these guys. You know my favorite episode with you? Mirror, Mirror.
Yes.
She played the bad with her. We were gonna show a clip from that tonight, but I don't think we were able to make the DVD player work. Because they still do film in these pictures up here. We had that clip we were gonna show of you in that sexy outfit and the
Yes,
knife, when you do the scene with Sulu and you're
Yes,
not,
yes.
you know, you're taking a big chance, mister.
And they showed my belly button.
Yeah.
That's why they wanted to,
I was the
Would you
that's why
first.
they wanted to take it
Would you say
out.
that line for me? I'm Sulu,
Yes.
and you just flirted with me, and I'm starting to come at you, and you pulled that knife out, and you said, "You're taking a big chance,
You're
mister."
taking a big chance, mister.
I already chance right there. What? Did you have 2 questions already? Come up and sign your autograph now.
Oh.
Huh? We can sign them outside, too.
Yeah. We'll sign them outside.
We'll sign them outside, that way we'll have a nice table. And
Just don't go to sleep before we go.
I think we're up, how are we doing on time? Anybody know?
About 10 minutes?
10 more minutes?
Yeah.
Another question right here? Did you write that on the card that's in my pocket?
What?
She wanted to know if you'd sing something
Does
for
she
her.
still sing? Would she sing for us?
At the drop of a hat. Everybody got a hat?
Somebody drop a hat, please. No hats.
All right, I see it. I see it. There's a hat.
Drop the hat.
Thank you.
It just dropped. Sing something.
Summertime, and the living is easy. Fish are jumping, and the cotton is high. Oh, your daddy's rich, and your ma is good looking. So hush, little baby, don't you cry. You're gonna wake up singing, and then you spread your wings, and you take to the sky. Ooh, but till that morning, ain't nothing can harm you. With your daddy and mommy standing by. Oh, with your daddy and mommy standing by.
Only in the shower. Only in the shower after that, no.
Shut it.